So the problem the UFC is facing right now, and the problem the new ownership is facing right now, is they have to build stars, and they really do need to do it in the mainstream media, because there's a lot of good fights coming up. But there's names that I'll tell you that you don't know who they are. That's the problem.
Welcome to the Reindl Report, a podcast out of San Diego, California that rewrites the definition of mediocrity.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
So come along for the ride as Paul Reindl takes you through the world of sports with insight, interviews, and incredibly bad jokes.
It just seems like the people that are so butthurt about it.
Did you just throw a butthurt out there?
Yeah, I said butthurt.
2005 calls. They want their turn back.
Yeah, walked right into that one.
Now, here's your host, Paul Reindl.
All right, welcome to it, episode 37 of the Reindl Report. My name is Paul Reindl, host of the Reindl Report. This is a San Diego-based sports podcast focusing primarily on what's going on in the San Diego sports world, but we also talk about what's going on the national scene as well. We got a lot to cover on this episode coming out in the second week of January. Happy New Year. I think you can still say Happy New Year, right? You got at least until Martin Luther King Day probably. And then after that, it's like, all right, it's 3 weeks into January. Everyone's finally starting to write 17 on their checks or whatever else instead of 16, right? So a lot to cover on this episode. Looking forward to it. Going to talk about the Chargers, what's going on there. There's a big meeting, a bunch of meetings happening in New York this week. We'll start to talk about what that could mean as far as the stadium and relocation and all of that. Chargers still looking for a head coach. I'll give you my thoughts on a couple of candidates that are rumored to be, that have already either been interviewed or are rumored to be interviewed. Want to talk about the NFL playoffs in general, what's going on. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers doing what they do. Definitely got some thoughts on that. Talk about some of the favorites. One conference definitely favored more than the other. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Want to talk about the San Diego State Aztecs basketball team a little bit. Do that on the back end of the podcast because, quite frankly, when you start your season 0-3 in conference play, as the Aztecs are at the time that this is being recorded, then you get bumped to the back of the line. And you get bumped to the back of the podcast. But I do have some thoughts on my beloved Aztecs. Going to get to that. And going to be joined by my buddy Alex Padilla. He was on this podcast just a couple of months ago. He is my UFC MMA correspondent. He follows the sport a lot more than I do. I wish I followed it more. I've been watching all the big fights, watching the pay-per-views, but he knows the ins and outs of the sport and what's going on with some of the fighters. And if you've been living under a rock, Ronda Rousey, one of the biggest fighters in UFC, really in the history of the sport. And maybe I'm completely off when I say that. Alex will be able to come in and correct me if I'm wrong there, but she lost a fight, lost their belt, about over a year ago, and just kind of fell off the face of the earth. Was apparently in a very dark place. I believe it was on the Ellen DeGeneres show where she said she was, contemplating suicide and was just in a very dark place because she had just risen to this super high status in the sport and had everything just ripped away when she lost that fight. So she was out of the octagon for over a year. UFC billed this as the return, and Ronda got her ass handed to her. The fight didn't even last a minute. So going to bring in Alex, talk about what's going on with her, what's going on with the rest of UFC, because I think it's a very fascinating sport. Like I said, I'm not super big on the UFC. I just haven't gotten into it. I don't know much about it. I would claim ignorance to a lot of things in the UFC, but it's it is rising in popularity extremely quickly, and it's rapidly on its way to becoming one of the most popular events and sports in the country. So want to bring in Alex. I think we'll all be a little smarter for what he has to say And so we got a lot to talk about on this edition of the Ronda Report, episode 37, and I'm really looking forward to it. But let us start in the NFL. That is the sport that drives the ship in any type of sports, radio, media, podcast, anything like that. You start with the NFL because that's what people want to hear. So Chargers trying to find a new coach. And, I'm kind of torn myself, and I know a lot of Chargers fans feel the same way. We're not really sure if we care about the new Chargers coach right now because we don't know if they're going to be the San Diego Chargers in a year. And if they aren't going to be the San Diego Chargers, then to hell with the coaching search. Nobody cares at that point. We only care about if they're going to be the San Diego Chargers and who might be coaching the San Diego Chargers, not the Carson Chargers, the Inglewood Chargers, anything like that. So, trying to follow as much as I can in this process of the team trying to bring in a bunch of offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, special teams coordinators, whoever, to try to find their next head coach. There's a couple that I would highlight. Matt Patricia from New England. He's been the defensive coordinator there. He's been with New England for about 12 years, and he's already interviewed, at least according to sources. And I would have to say that he has got to be the front runner at this point. Mike Smith was my pick heading into it once, a few of the candidates were announced. And look, there's a lot, I don't know about a lot, but there are still several candidates that don't get leaked and they don't get announced. And Adam Schefter doesn't get the inside scoop on some, he doesn't get everybody. And so, you might know that the Chargers are interviewing 5 or 6 people. They're probably interviewing at least 10 would be my guess. But of the names that have gone public, I would have to say Mike Smith he was my favorite. And at the time that this is being recorded, it doesn't look like he's going to be the San Diego Chargers' next coach. Looks like he's going to go out of Jacksonville, actually, where he's been previously. But he was a defensive coordinator. He's a little bit older. He's been a head coach, and he's been a successful head coach. And I think that's what stands out. It appears that the Chargers, they want to follow this trend of young, up-and-coming coordinators going to become head coaches and stuff like that. And it's worked for teams in the past, so I'm not going to sit here and, debate whether or not that's a good idea, if it's going to work or not. We'll do that once we actually know who the guy is, but I fall more into the school of thought that, look, get the older, experienced guy that has been there before, has been a head coach. All right, you're running a program at this point. You're not just running the defense or anything like that. You are the guy. You are the head coach. So if at all possible, I want the guy that's done it before and the guy that was successful at it. But like I said, it doesn't appear that Mike Smith is going to be with the Chargers. He is leaning towards Jacksonville, reportedly, of course. But I would have to say a close second, a good second choice would be Matt Patricia, because if you're going to take any coordinator, anybody that doesn't have the head coaching experience, why would you not want the guy from the Bill Belichick tree of coaching? You want the guy that's been in New England for the last 12 years. You want the guy that's got a handful of Super Bowl rings. You want the guy that's been mentored by and learning under Bill Belichick, one of, if not the greatest NFL coach ever. We'll see about what happens this year, how many championships he actually finishes with, but he's going to be in the conversation. I don't think there's any denying that. So I would definitely say, if he is the guy, which fingers crossed at this point, let's hope he is. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a ton about his philosophies or anything like that. And I'm looking forward to, if he is the Chargers candidate that they pick, then I'm looking forward to learning more about him. But because I don't know a whole lot, I'm going to have to just go with my gut instinct that says, look, pick the guy that's been learning under Belichick, that's been in New England for 12 years, hasn't been bouncing around from team to team, didn't just come from college into the NFL for a couple years, anything like that. No, he's been around. He seems to know what he's doing. He's got certainly the qualifications enough to give him the benefit of the doubt. So that's what's up with the Chargers coaching situation. We don't know anything yet. They're interviewing guys. Guys are flying into town. Chargers are flying out of town to meet with people. I'm sure a couple people that are on their list might still be playing in the NFL, in the playoffs. And sometimes that can complicate things. And, teams won't allow any of their coaches or their coordinators to interview for a job until they're out of the playoffs, and because they got a job to do still. So we'll just have to wait and see. But what is going on with the stadium? At the time that this podcast is being recorded, which is a Monday, not a whole lot. Nothing yet. And the key word there is yet, because there is a meeting happening this week in New York. Bunch of the owners, they're going to talk about stadium and financing, and this could be the start of finally getting some answers. So all I have for you, if you're wondering what's going on, is we should know something very soon. And I say it every once in a while. It's kind of one of the struggles of a weekly podcast as opposed to a daily podcast, is it's tough to report on things, especially a story that can change from a day-to-day basis. So hopefully we know something soon, and hopefully I'll be able to get in here and we can chat about it some more. But there's some theories that have been floating around, and the theory that I at least gravitate towards and that I am kind of clinging to would be that the NFL is going to push for the Raiders to relocate to Las Vegas. This is something that Mark Davis has not officially relocated or filed for relocation, but he wants to. He's probably going to. And that would be a good thing for Chargers fans, because what that does is it frees up Los Angeles a little bit. It relieves some of the stress and the pressure that is on Dean Spanos and the San Diego Chargers. How does that work? If you haven't heard this theory, let me break it down for you real quick. The Chargers, they have until Sunday, January 15th. They were given a 1-year option to move to Los Angeles. And that's kind of what we've been waiting on. That's the countdown, has been Sunday. It's probably not going to be Sunday, because most likely if any announcement was going to be made, my guess is it would be on a Friday heading into the weekend. But I also wouldn't be surprised if old Dino took, until the 11th hour. So who knows? But if the Chargers choose to not take that LA option, then after January 15th, that option becomes the Raiders option. So the Raiders could move to Los Angeles. Now the Raiders, they don't not want to move to Los Angeles. I know there's a double negative. It might be hard for you to follow there. They don't not want to go to Los Angeles. They would just much rather go to Las Vegas. And that's where I think they should go. The NFL should be in Las Vegas. And if any NFL team is going to be in Sin City, you telling me it's not going to be the Oakland Raiders? Can you really think of and make an argument for any other team? No, it has to be the Raiders. And so they'll take LA. If Vegas gets, blown, if that plan gets blown to smithereens and the NFL says, no, we don't want to be in Vegas, they'll go to LA, sure. And so that's why there's been some pressure on the Chargers of them saying, if we're going to do it, we got to do it now. But if, and hopefully when, the NFL says, hey, Oakland, you go to Vegas, we'll keep a spot open in Los Angeles. The Chargers, look, I know that would still have that looming threat of Los Angeles over us, but it would buy us some time. And that would buy San Diego and the city officials and the mayor and San Diego State and everybody else that's involved, it would buy them some time to work out a deal, to sit down with hopefully a cooler, more calm Dean Spanos, now that he's got some pressure off and he can just relax. And we can try to work on a deal to get the deal done here, because like I've been saying for a long time, I don't think the NFL wants them to move. I think the NFL wants the San Diego Chargers to stay in San Diego. However, in one of my last podcasts, I said, look, my attitude has changed. I was very optimistic for so long that the Chargers weren't going anywhere. Dean doesn't have the huevos. Not going to do it. And then a couple weeks ago, oh my God, they're gone. This is going to happen. I can't believe it. I've been wrong this whole time. Now I'm kind of in the boat of, I don't really know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I can tell you what the signs are and where I'm kind of leaning now and how I have kind of switched back to a more optimistic. It just seems like the longer that this thing gets, drag out for, that it appears more likely that the Chargers will stay in San Diego. But we don't know anything for now. I'm really hoping that we learn something from these meetings here in the next few days, and that just some sort of decisions are made to just give us something to work with and not just extend the process a little bit longer and just don't have us hanging by a thread. We need to know one way or the other, because this is just we've reached the breaking point. We're not getting there. We've been there. We are there. So hopefully we'll have some answers there. All right, that's enough of my blabbering. Going to bring on, like I said, Alex Padilla from the Mighty 1090, buddy of mine for a couple years now. He is my UFC, my MMA correspondent, and we talked earlier about what happened in the fight. And I want to bring in Alex to talk about what's up next for Ronda Rousey. What did he see in that fight? Have we heard from her? And what's on the horizon in UFC? So bringing on Alex Padilla on Twitter at AlexPadilla86. Alex, what's going on, man?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me again.
No problem. Thanks for coming back. So,
yeah, man.
Alex, what happened a couple of weeks ago? I mean, I know what happened. I watched it because, like most of Ronda's fights, it was able to fit on the limitations of Instagram's 1-minute video.
Yeah.
It was just she was on the other end of this. I mean, obviously, she got she took a couple of quick punches and just never really seemed to get on any sort of groove, and the fight was over before you know it. But what did you actually see? You watch a lot more of these fights than I do. I mean, what happened to Ronda Rousey?
Yeah, basically you just saw the exact same thing that happened in November of last year when she fought Holly Holm. She came in thinking that she could stand with this person, which is Amanda Nunes, except the only difference is that Nunes is a absolute monster, where she has like the most power of any 135 woman in the division. So when she hits you, it's a lot different than when Holly Holm hits you. So as we saw, it took Holly Holm 2 rounds and a kick to the neck to knock out Ronda. But Paul, it's not. You don't even have to be a trainer or you don't have to be a professional to see that Ronda Rousey's stand-up game is just not up to par with how the women's MMA has evolved around her. And I don't know if it just passed her by or if it's a lot of people are blaming her coach. But what I saw was someone that has no head movement, someone that stands in front of her opponent, someone that when she gets hit, it's like the first time she's ever been hit. And I don't know if you noticed that right away. As soon as she gets hit, she is wobbly. She has no movement whatsoever, like a professional fighter does. It almost looks like she's a newbie standing sometimes, which is really shocking because she was the baddest woman in the UFC for years. And it was more of the same. It just happened to be faster.
Now, that's kind of been Ronda's MO for at least over the last, year or so that I've been kind of following the sport a little bit more, trying to get into it, was that Ronda, she gets you on the mat. She's as good as anybody, and she can defeat, she has no match if she gets you on the floor, but she just cannot stand toe-to-toe with a lot of these fighters. I mean, is that really just what happened? Because I know what you're talking about. It looked like she was almost stunned. And she takes a couple hits, and is she trying to go toe-to-toe with these guys?
The first fight in the UFC we saw against Liz Carmouche, and Liz had her in trouble because she was able to stand with her for a little bit. So it wasn't until Ronda took her down that she got in the armbar. We saw Miesha Tate. We saw their second fight, and it went 3 rounds, and that's because Miesha was able to stand up with her. And although she lost, and both of them lost, obviously, but, it's just something in her stand-up. And I don't know about you or how you would prepare for a fight, but the way I look at it is anything could happen in a fight, so you have to prepare for the worst. And I feel like she's so confident, and she's such a confident person that she's like, I'm going to go in here and do my thing, and that's how it's going to go. But the moment that something goes wrong, we've seen it 2 fights in a row now, it's just like, whoa, and it's over. And there's nothing she could do about it, and she's just not mentally, physically able to get out of it. And, I mean, once could be a fluke. Twice like that in 47 seconds, there's something there. There's something in your training. There's something that you're not prepared for. And just every time I look at her fight, and I've seen this replay a couple times, and I've seen the Holly Holm fight, and she just stands in front of women, and she gets punched. She never moves her head. She never moves side to side. And that's, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, you have to switch levels on people. Which means you have to move your head. You have to go up and down. You can't go directly straight at someone. You have to go side to side. You have to cut off the octagon. There's so many intricacies to standing up and fighting that I can't really explain to you. But I was hoping her coach would be able to. But I think it's that simple. I really do think to answer your question, I think it's that simple. If she's standing up, the women's MMA has evolved so much that it's just she's not at that level of where Amanda Nunes is at. If they fight again, I think the same thing happens. Maybe a little longer, but I think the exact same thing happens.
Now, just real quick to answer one of your first questions there in that answer, how I would prepare for a fight, I wouldn't prepare for a fight. I would just turn and run. But no, I mean, you talk towards the end there, you talked about her team and her coaches and her trainers. I mean, at some point, I've been seeing them taking a lot of the blame that they need to be fired. They did not get her prepared at all for this. I mean, they had over a year. I mean, I don't know how long this particular fight was billed, but I mean, the whole the comeback had been billed for a while,
right?
And it just seemed like, I mean, she just wasn't even close to prepared, not at all. Yeah, exactly. She was worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know the UFC on the Fight Pass. There's like today's national championship, you saw there's multiple ways to watch this game, multiple channels. The UFC does that for their pay-per-views too, and one of the options is corner cam. So you can just listen, instead of listening to Mike Goldberg and Joe Rogan, you listen to their corner. And his entire 47 seconds, he's like, move your head, move your head, move your head. That's literally all he said until she got hit. And he goes, grab her. You know, like, so the coaching is just not there. There's a guy named like Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn. Those two guys are probably the top of the top coaches. And when you see them and you hear them in the corner, they're actually giving you advice. They're teaching you what to do. They're telling you what to do. And this guy, it's just a known thing that he's not necessarily Ronda Rousey's mom told her to fire him many, many years ago because she doesn't think he's a good coach. Ronda's boyfriend, Travis Brown, who's also a UFC fighter, moved from Greg Jackson's camp to Ronda Rousey's camp, and he's actually regressed. He's actually looked worse. This guy was coming in. He was going to be like the next big heavyweight championship fighter, and he just has looked bad ever since he moved over there. And those are really his two fighters. So it's not hard to tell that her coaching isn't that great. You could just tell. Like, it's just not there.
What's crazy about that corner cam, I'm going to have to check that out next pay-per-view, because I can't even imagine being in the ring, getting your head just pounded. You're trying to shake this person off you, and you're also trying to listen to your coaches and your trainers and all that. That's
but to be fair to him as well, it was 47 seconds, and she was hurt within 10, 15 seconds. So it's kind of hard to coach someone who's probably not even hearing you at that point in this particular fight. But the game plan coming in,
everything leading up
exactly how she looked like against Holly Holm.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing on that fight, were you surprised that they called it so early? I mean, I know she was getting pounded, but there was a lot of people, at least on Twitter, you know, Twitter is Twitter, but because she never fell down, she was obviously stunned and taken aback. But I mean, for somebody that maybe doesn't watch as much UFC as you might, were you surprised at all that the fight got called without her falling to the mat or anything like that?
I saw someone say something about how in the fight before, there was a fight before that the same ref was reffing, and he let it go. And people were saying that he stopped it early because it's a woman fight. And I'm just like, okay, guys, all you got to do is watch that last 10 seconds of that fight. Ronda Rousey was out on her feet. You don't have to get knocked down to get knocked out. We've seen it before. And she was clearly out. Once he stopped it, she had no quarrels about it whatsoever. She looked stunned, and she looked like she didn't even know where she was. So to me, it was perfectly fine stoppage. I didn't need to see anymore, and I get why people get pissed because it's, like you said, you see it on Instagram. But, yeah, I had no problem with stoppage whatsoever. Like, she was wrecked, and she was done.
Alex, last thing on Ronda, I guess, is, I mean, what's next? We know what happened when she lost to Holly Holm. She was out for over a year. I was talking earlier on the podcast. She was on, I want to say it was the Ellen DeGeneres show, and she talked about how she was in just a really dark place, suicidal thoughts, really scary stuff. I mean, this is all sports and entertainment. Like, there's more bigger things than, you know, when she's going to get back in the ring. But have you seen anything? I mean, is she in a better place, at least now, after this loss than her first loss? I mean, it's getting to the point where it's pretty ridiculous how high she was in the sport and how far she has fallen. So there's got to be some concern for her. What's next? I know we saw an Instagram post or something like that.
Yeah, she put an Instagram post up today, like quoting like J.K. Rowling or something about how a quote that J.K. Rowling created Harry Potter after she put this quote up or something. I don't know. Something about being at rock bottom and building your life from there. And that's the first thing we've heard from her. And it's one thing that we've seen now twice in a row. Ronda's not a great loser. You know, she doesn't handle losing well. So we haven't heard a single thing from her. And I haven't even seen a TMZ video of her showing up at an airport or anything with her head covered like last time. So I don't know what's next for her. I have a really hard time seeing her fight as a challenger, not for a title. I feel like she's bigger than that, which may come off wrong if I'm saying it, but I feel like she's a celebrity. She's probably the richest woman in the sport, and kind of like Gina Carano. When Gina Carano lost to Cyborg, she never fought again. She just kind of went to movies, and we've seen her in all kinds of movies, including Deadpool. So losing right now, you're going to get made fun of on Twitter. You're going to become a meme. You're going to see all those nasty pictures that we saw of her face bending certain ways. But that just lasts right now. She'll recover from it, and I really do think that Hollywood's not done with her, just because she's really attractive and she's really famous, and there's not that many women action stars. So I think that's what's next. To be honest, I really don't see her fighting as a challenger against no-name women. I really don't see it. I would be surprised if she comes back and because she's not going to get a rematch. That's for sure. So I think she's done fighting, but I don't think we've heard the last of her.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I was flipping through the TV guide just the other day, going through, HBO, Showtime, all that stuff, and I see Entourage, and that actually had me thinking about Ronda Rousey and this podcast and everything, and I go, she's going to be fine. Like, she could start doing some movies.
Roadhouse hasn't even come out yet, and she already filmed that. So let's say that does well, although I don't think a remake of Roadhouse is going to do well, but if it does, then you never know. So
Alex, before I let you go, elsewhere in the UFC, what is coming up? What's on tap? What do we need to be aware of? I would normally ask right now about Conor McGregor. That is my guy, but he's taking some time off. He's having a baby. That's
the problem with the UFC right now is that they lost Brock Lesnar. They lost John Jones. They lost now Ronda Rousey. Every single title holder that they have, no one is fighting until March. And that was just announced today. So up until today, they had no scheduled fights with any of their champions until today. Conor McGregor's taking a long time off. And I don't see Conor coming back quietly because he knows that he's really – Paul, you say you're not that big of a fan, but you still watch. Tell me another big-name fighter other than Conor McGregor and the other three I just named you.
Just because I've done some homework, I can name a couple. Nate Diaz.
Right. But Nate Diaz isn't going to draw a massive crowd unless he's fighting Conor McGregor.
Right, exactly.
Nate Diaz has never been a draw. He's been a fan favorite. So the problem the UFC is facing right now and the problem the new ownership is facing right now is they have to build stars, and they really do need to do it in the mainstream media because there's a lot of good fights coming up. But there's names that I'll tell you that you don't know who they are. That's the problem. So their next big fight is in March 4th, and it's the welterweight championship between Woodley and Stephen Thompson. But other than that, man, I just said this on my podcast last week. The UFC is in an identity, they're trying to find their identity right now because we know fighting is a very individualist sport. It's not a team sport. So you're not going to go – you can go watch the Patriots every year because it's the Patriots, but you're not going to go watch a fight if you don't know who's fighting. So the UFC is in a big – I think they're really in a conundrum right now where they need to build stars because they've lost a lot of stars.
Yeah, Alex, and I know I said that was going to be your last thing, but you kind of said something there that just sparked one last question. You talked about the new ownership, and from what I've been reading, this new ownership, they really bought into, and for a lot of money, they bought into the UFC because Ronda Rousey was the star at the time. So, I mean, what is that going to do to this ownership group? I mean, you talked about how they're going to have to just start building their own stars. What exactly does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know. And the new ownership is coming and they're doing their own thing. They fired a lot of people. They brought in their own people. Mike Goldberg is gone. They're bringing in a new play-by-play guy. They have a new matchmaker, which is a big deal because the UFC has always been known to put the best fighters against each other. So that could change if they're trying to protect some fighters. We've seen boxing do it for many years. But yeah, WME IMG, they bought this company for $4.2 billion because they had Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor and Brock Lesnar and John Jones. They had those guys. But with Jones and Lesnar suspended for another year and Conor wanting a piece of the pie as far as ownership goes and Ronda up in the air with who knows what she's going to do, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be interesting because they have a ton of talented fighters with charisma and with personality, maybe not up to the par of Conor McGregor, but who has had that in the past 20 years anyway. So it's just going to be really interesting to see what happens because, like I just said, I talked about it on my podcast too, and I was just like, I don't know. I'm not excited for a fight anytime coming up. And I love all these fights, and I will watch most fights, but there's nothing on the radar right now where I'm like, oh, I can't wait for that. And that's not a good thing, especially because there's a pay-per-view coming up that ain't nobody going to watch that thing. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, you said it. We'll see. Alex, thanks, man. Hey, plug your podcast on the Mighty 1090. Tell us about it.
It's Fights and Pints. Me and my buddy AJ. We normally talk about fights, but right now in the down period, we're probably going to get into some more beer talk because that's always entertaining. But yeah, you can catch it on iTunes, mighty1090.com.
Right on.
It's all there.
Fights and Pints. All right, Alex, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, Alex Padilla on Twitter at AlexPadilla86. Really good stuff right there. Really good stuff. Look, that's why I bring him in, because when it comes to things that I don't know a whole lot about and I don't study a bunch, I'm not going to sit here and try to BS you guys and try to craft my way around some sort of hot take. I'll tell you, look, I don't really know a whole lot about that. Like when it comes to soccer, I know San Diego is a very hotbed full of soccer fans. I just don't follow the sport. So if something comes up, I'm going to go get somebody that knows what they're talking about. And then my dumbass is going to ask them really stupid questions, but hopefully we can be educated on it. And so that's what I do, especially with the MMA and the UFC, because it is rising in popularity and I'm trying to get into it a lot more than I have been. And I'm paying attention to it more than I have in the past. But I want to bring in a guy that knows way more than I do. Hopefully he knew more than you did. And now we're smarter sports fans because of it. So thank you to Alex Padilla. All right. Well, we have passed the half-hour mark on this podcast, and so I'm going to try to wrap things up quickly. I do have a couple of things I'd like to say, some final thoughts here. In the NFL playoffs, wasn't a lot of exciting games in the wild card round. There just weren't. There wasn't a single game, really, that was even close. They all became blowouts, and they all were not very entertaining. However, the one thing that I took away from that was Aaron Rodgers. Good God Almighty. I mean, another Hail Mary pass, if you somehow missed it and haven't seen the highlight, at the end of the first half between the Giants and the Packers. And that's like his third or fourth Hail Mary completion for a touchdown in the last 2 years. I mean, you remember the Lions and the Cardinals from last year. And I'm speechless when I see these plays being completed, because at some point, you can't just say it's all luck. You really can't. It's partially luck. I mean, things have to happen, but you got to start thinking they might actually practice that kind of play, and they might actually know what they're doing. They might have some sort of edge when it comes to the Hail Mary. And I had to say that because it was incredible to see that again and just think, how many more times is this guy going to do that? A lot of quarterbacks could go most of their career, if not their entire career, without successfully completing one of them. Dude's done 3 or 4 now in just the last couple of years. So pretty great stuff. A lot of exciting action in the NFC coming up. In the divisional round, you have Dallas and those Green Bay Packers. Like, Green Bay is playing as good as any team in football right now. Aaron Rodgers, like we just talked about, he's playing at just a different level. He's that dude right now. And the team looks like they could make a run. That they're getting hot at the right time and they're poised to make a run. However, they're going up against the number 1 seeded Dallas, best team in the NFC all season long. That game is going to be outstanding, and I cannot wait to talk about it next week. And then on the other side, we have a rematch from the NFC Championship game 4 years ago, something like that, 4 or 5 years ago. Seattle on the road taking on Atlanta. Atlanta, flashiest offense in the NFC, I think even in the entire NFL. And Matt Ryan was an MVP candidate. It's going to be in the Georgia Dome. And so everything's kind of getting me to lean towards picking Atlanta. They seem like the safer pick. I think they're like a 4-point favorite. But here's the thing. I'm not prepared to just count Seattle out. Now, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, oh, they're the same team that we've seen in the past, Super Bowl contenders right away. And, they're not the same defense. They don't have Marshawn Lynch. Russell Wilson's been hurt. He seems to be healthy now, but he's had his share of injuries this season. Their offense just does not seem to get going. The Legion of Boom seems to kind of lost its lore a little bit, and I don't know if that's just with Earl Thomas being out or what, but it's just not the same as it was maybe just a couple of years ago. They don't seem like they have that intimidation factor or anything like that. However, if I'm going to pick a team to go on the road and win a playoff game, not a whole lot of teams that I would pick ahead of Seattle. I'm going to pick the team with the quarterback that has been there and the coach that has been there now for 5 straight years. and knows how to win on the road and knows how to switch gears and turn things on when the game matters, in the playoffs. So that should be a very good game. I'm looking forward to that. My gut tells me pick Atlanta. That's the safer pick, but it's hard to bet against Seattle. Just like it's hard, I was saying last week, I'm done betting against Aaron Rodgers. Okay, when the guy says he's going to run the table, he goes and runs the table. When he spells out relax, he's right, relax, because he had it under control. So tough to bet against the Seahawks. On the AFC side, nothing really exciting. I mean, Pittsburgh, Kansas City should be a good game, but it's still the Patriots. Their path to the Super Bowl is so freaking wide open. I just cannot. I can't really think of any other year off the top of my head, at least, where it's been just this clear of a path for one team to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, they are 16-point favorites against the Brock Osweiler-led Houston Texans playing on the road in Foxborough. 16 points in a divisional round playoff game. That's ridiculous. And I even did some homework for you guys because my first thought was, is that the biggest point spread in divisional round history? 16 points is stupid. It was not the highest point spread. It was very close to being the biggest point spread. The biggest was in 1999. That's 18 years ago. The Minnesota Vikings were a 16.5-point favorite versus the Arizona Cardinals in the divisional round of the NFC playoffs, and they covered. Minnesota did cover that 16.5 spread. Now, like I said earlier, this podcast being recorded early in the week. It's being recorded on a Monday. So at the time, it's a 16-point spread. My guess would be that a lot of people are going to favor New England. They're going to think the Patriots better win by more than 16 against Brock Lobster and the Texans. So, people start playing New England enough, that spread, that point spread's going to get a little bit wider. And I could definitely see it surpassing 16.5, and that would just be absolutely insane. Just a totally clear path for the Patriots to go to Houston, of all places, for Super Bowl 51. If you're a Patriots fan, I think it is safe to say that you can buy a non-refundable ticket to Houston from just a couple of weeks from now. Wrapping things up, college, San Diego State basketball, my beloved Aztecs. It pains me so much to have to put you at the end of this podcast, just the very bottom of the totem pole, but oh my goodness, they're 0-3 in conference play. This is just something that, look, I moved down to San Diego in 2009. That was my freshman year. Same freshman year as Kawhi Leonard. He went on and did some things in the NBA. I don't know if you've heard of him. But I was talking to somebody. I go, I can't remember the last time San Diego State basketball lost 3 games in a row. We started thinking about it. I was like, I really don't think they have done that in the, 7-8 years that I've been down here, that I've been following the team. I don't think they have. I think you have to go before the, Kawhi Leonard days. Well, now they've done it twice this year, couple of 3-game losing streaks. And they start off conference 0-3, and the team just does not look good. They're not a tournament team. The only chance they have at getting into the absolute only chance that they have is by winning the Mountain West. But even then, they're looking at a one and done. The team just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of fight. They don't seem to have a lot of talent on the floor. I hate to say it, but their most highly touted, recruit, their biggest star player, Malik Pope, he can't stay healthy. He can't get on the court. So I don't think it's unfair to say that they don't have a whole lot of talent on the court. The guys that they have on the court are doing their best. Jeremy Hemsley could be a really good guard. Trey Kell has not been able to shoot the ball well lately. I can only assume he's going to snap out of this funk. Everybody goes through a cold spree here. But one of their best players is sitting on the bench and he's hurt and they can't get on the court. That's going to hurt your team's chances. And something I said it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I've said it on this podcast before. If I have, I apologize for repeating myself, but I'm going to say it again because it's as relevant then as it is now when it comes to the Aztecs. And I said this after the team lost to Loyola, Illinois back in December. And I said, you know what? This team, they just don't have the guy. They just don't have the guy. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying they don't have a really good player. like I said, I think Kell and Hemsley can both be very quality guards. I think Zylan Cheatham's definitely got NBA potential. But what I mean by the guy is the guy that's just going to take over a game. And I don't think this is something that, let's just wait and see who emerges as the guy and emerges as the leader. No, you either have him on your roster or you don't. And I just don't think that the team has that this year. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Not everybody has one of these guys that I'm talking about. But San Diego State in particular, we've been used to having guys like that. Guys like Kawhi Leonard, Chase Tapley, Xavier Thames, DJ Gay. And the number one guy, like I said, that fits this criteria, Jamal Franklin. Have we ever missed Jamal Franklin more than we do now, seeing this team struggle? And this thought came into my head after the Loyola game because they had a guy that shot 11 for 12. The guy was shooting 73% on the season, and his freaking percentage increased after that game. That's unheard of. And I just remember thinking, you know what? If Jamal Franklin was on this team, there is zero chance that he's going to let some guy from Loyola, Illinois shoot 11 for 12 against him and them go on to beat the Aztecs. He would not allow it to happen. Neither would X Thames. There's been a handful of guys over the years that would just step up, do whatever they had to do, and put their foot down and say, this isn't happening. And I have not seen that. I don't think that guy exists on the San Diego State team. And I think that's where a lot has, they've been lacking. And I don't think it's not a heart thing for the guys that are on the team. It's just, like I said, it's just something that's missing and they don't have it. I hope that they can figure something out and try to get some of that swagger or mentality, killer instinct, whatever you want to call it. I would love to see them get there. But right now, it's looking like their entire season is just a waste right now. It's a wash. It doesn't matter. Everything comes down to 4 days in March in Las Vegas for the Mountain West tournament, and we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. I don't know how much I'm going to be talking about the Aztecs between now and then, to be honest, but we'll see after we get through the Super Bowl and spring training starting to roll around. We don't have a whole lot to talk about. We will be talking about the Aztecs. So that's all I've got for this episode 37 of the Ronda Report. I want to thank Alex Padilla from the Mighty 1090 on Twitter, at AlexPadilla86, for joining me. Some really good UFC stuff there. The interview should be posted individually as well if you want to go back and listen to that. Which brings me to my regular spiel at the end of every podcast. How can you listen to these podcasts? Well, obviously you're listening to it right now, but maybe you just saw that I tweeted this or something like that. It was shared on Facebook. I don't know. How can you follow this? You can subscribe on iTunes. This podcast is on iTunes. You just hit subscribe and you can get them right on your phone, on your laptop, however you get your iTunes podcast. That's the best way to do it. Just hit subscribe and it automatically gets sent to you. You can also go to the rondareport.blogspot.com. That's my blog. That's where I put all the episodes, all the interviews, everything gets archived right there. And you can follow me on Twitter at thepolarbearsd. That's going to do it for me. I will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for listening in.